Hello and welcome back to Armageddon Empires. You'll notice I'm back at the new game settings here. Decided to restart. I actually went through and recorded a whole bunch using the original setup that I had, but it ended up turning into quite a boring game, just the way it worked out. I was up against the Machine Empire, which is a very slow kind of starting deck. It takes a long time for them to get going. There were no independent forces anywhere near where I started. I went through the entire game, didn't find any, and it was just kind of boring. There wasn't even any combat until like turn 30, so I decided to start a new game. This time, I picked the Free Mutants as my opponent. Largely because they are, rather than leaving it on random, because the Free Mutants tend to be a bit more exciting in smaller games because they can get up and get going fairly quickly. So we will get this started. So on this screen, you need to actually roll the dice to determine who's going to place their tiles first, even though it has absolutely no effect on anything else in the game. One of the big complaints about this game is the user interface, and sometimes it's not the most intuitive or the easiest to use in the world. But I'm just going to lay my tiles out here. I can put them in any one of these green hexes. I'm starting in the corner, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my abandoned base, which is going to be my main headquarters down there. Set it. And then we'll put the destroyed factories and the shanty towns out in front. After that, we get to put our stronghold out, and in this case I have the Imperial Fortress, which will be my headquarters for the game. As you can imagine, headquarters are important places. If you lose the headquarters, you lose the game. And yeah, so with that we'll start. Game is going to grind away for a little bit here. Generates the map. Okay, so we are up and going. Very first start of every turn, you need to actually roll for initiative, and you can bid resources to do that. It starts, you have 3 dice. And you'll roll the 3 dice, and your opponent will roll 3 dice, and whoever gets more successes goes first. But you can also bid resources. So if I bid 1 human resource, I get an extra die. If I bid the materials as well, it gets me a second die, and now it says I need to spend 2 resources for the next die, so I'd have to spend both my energy and my science to get the next one. The first turn of the game, you definitely don't want to be doing that. You've got... you just don't have the resources for it. I mean, 1 of each is not going to take you very far if you burn them all to get some extra action points. So roll the dice, and it looks like I'll be going first. And now you notice here too that by virtue of going first, I have 12 action points, whereas my opponent has 6. This is important because everything you do in this game requires action points. Doesn't matter if you're recruiting units or moving armies or building facilities or anything. Absolutely everything you do does require action points. So having more of those to spend means that you can do more in a given turn. So with that, we'll start the round, and I'm going to take a look around my start location here. So right off the bat, can see here, there's my base. I've got the rest of the terrain filled in around it now. I've got some mountains and some hills and some rougher terrain kind of to my rear. And then this spotty looking mess here is actually a city, which is nice to have close to home because it actually gives the opportunity to hopefully pick up some more resources fairly early on or fairly close. The rest of the map looks relatively flat. Over here is almost entirely desert. Notice how that tile looks a little bit different. That's usually a sign that it's a unique tile of some sort. There's something unique going on there. So I'm going to have to send something over to check that out pretty quick. Over here. And now my guess would be the free mutants are somewhere up in this corner. Typically, if you start off in this corner, you're on a two-player game, the enemy's going to be in the opposite corner. And you kind of meet in the middle and fight it out there. So that's sort of what the lay of the land looks like. Now let's look at my hand. So it's a pretty decent hand. I've got MOBV-V Panther, which is sort of a medium tank. It's a good all-round unit. It's got 5 attack, 5 defense, 8 hit points. It's relatively inexpensive to get out. You can see it costs 2 of each resource plus 4 action points. So conceivably I could get this into the field next turn if I wanted to. It has a special ability called Assault 5, which means that, well, like it says on the tin here, you can add 5 to its attack dice, but then suffers a -2 defense penalty for the remainder of the round and must remain committed for an additional round. So use it once and then you can't attack again the next turn. But it does get you a 10-die attack in, which is useful. Beside them, we have the Imperial Rangers. Now, these are a wonderful unit for me to have started with in my hand. It's going to take me a couple of turns to get them out, but they are a scout unit, and a very, very good one. They're not as tough as the Panthers, you can see. They've only got 4 attack, 4 defense. They actually cost more to get out in the field, but they're fast-moving. They have a movement of 4, and more importantly, they can go into stealth mode, so they aren't observed by anything that doesn't have the recon ability itself, and they can conduct recon. They also have the ability Commando, which means that they can operate outside of my supply area. Now, normally, I'll just turn on the supply map here, you can see all the stuff that's highlighted is hexes that I have in supply. Anything outside of that is, well, out of supply. And units slow down to 1 hex per turn, they can only move at 1 hex per turn, and they suffer a penalty to their attack and defense anytime they are out of supply. So extending your supply range out is a major component of the game. You can't just march an army straight across the map and try and track down your opponent. You have to actually get your logistics set up so that you can do that without them being heavily penalized. So next up we have the Imperial Research Lab. It's a facility. It'll attach to my Imperial Fortress here. That's what these rectangles represent, is my ability to add additional cards to the fortress. And it is what lets you gain access to the game's tech tree. So, the tech tree is, well, it's not even a tech tree, but basically what you're able to do is create new cards that will buff up other cards. You can create higher tech weapons for your infantry and armor for your tanks and things like that that'll buff them up a bit. Going to skip over the Emperor's Own for now and go to the Industrial Complex. The Industrial Complex is just a resource generator. I plunk this down in my fortress and it'll give me 1 material and 1 energy resource per turn. Not too much exciting beyond that. The Imperial Infantry here are your baseline infantry. They're the bog standard infantry of the Empire. They have pretty mediocre stats overall, only 4 hit points, 3 attack, 3 defense, a resistance of 1, which is what you use when you're defending against biological weapons. And the resistance of 1 is terrible, but I mean, hey, they're just dudes, so they die easily to that sort of stuff. If you give them the plague or infect them with neurotoxin, it's not going to end well for them. But they have a special ability that allows them to have an extra attachment, and this ties back into that tech tree, or the technology. So I could conceivably give them 2 different technological advantages. And that can turn them into fairly decent combatants on their own, but they do take a little while to work up. So they're good for garrisoning, keeping minor enemies from being able to wander in and take your territory and stuff like that, but until you get them beefed up a little bit, they're pretty weak. Emperor's Own is an elite unit of infantry. You can see they're a fair bit tougher than the Imperial Infantry, and they have 2 special abilities. The first one's called Fanatic, that lets you gain an extra 4 attack, bringing their total attack score up to 9. But they have to spend hit points to do this, so they'll damage themselves to do more damage. And then Valor is they gain an extra attack and an extra defense for the duration of battle for any friendly unit that's destroyed in that battle. So, not the most useful ability. I mean, if you're relying on having other units killed to buff up your Emperor's Own, you're probably doing something wrong, but if a battle's going kind of sideways, it can help out with that. So, for the rest of this turn, I guess I should actually start playing and stop talking. I can't actually deploy anything, because I only have 1 of each resource, and everything that I have costs more than 1 of each resource, or at least 1 of the resources I need 2 of. And so all I'm going to do this turn is draw a card, I get another Emperor's Own, and then I'm going to create a couple extra armies. Just leave them blank. I'll create 3 extra armies, and now I'm doing this because it takes 3 action points to create an army. And early on in the game, you'll oftentimes have a surplus of action points that you don't really need, whereas you don't have much in the way of resources. Later on in the game, you'll have lots and lots of resources, but the limiting factor ends up becoming your action points. So if you can get these armies created and ready and kind of waiting, then later on, when you start getting more units out, you can just filter them into the armies without it costing you the action points to do so. So with that, I've spent all my action points, and I'm going to press Enter. Going first again. So now this turn I could deploy the infantry, but I want to save up and for 1 more turn and get those rangers out. The infantry isn't going to do much of anything right now, but the rangers can get me jump-started on my exploration. So this turn is going to be really boring. I'm just going to create armies, and then end my turn. Like most 4X games, the first few turns tend to involve hitting the next turn button quite a bit. But this turn, I can deploy my rangers. So to deploy them, I just drag them from my hand over top my base and drop them. Now they're sitting in the garrison. I don't want them to stay there, so I'm going to drop them into an army and then rename that army. Let's call them Eyes and Ears. Excellent. So now you can see if I right click on my stack of armies here, that's what these little rectangles represent. I've got Eyes and Ears. So I'm going to put them into stealth mode and get them started exploring. I'm going to explore around the back end here first. You'll notice that even though they have 4 movement points, as soon as I move them into the mountains, they're pretty much done, because it takes 3 action points to go into a mountain square, or any very difficult terrain. So, which is part of the reason why I wanted to get that exploration kind of done and out of the way first. Not much else I can do this round. I'm not even going to bother building more armies. I've got quite a few sitting there, just kind of waiting to be used. I can, however, draw another card. Intel Center. That's actually a pretty handy one to get early on, because it will start giving me action point bonuses. I can deploy this into my abandoned base, and it will give me an extra 2 action points every turn. It also increases the defense of the base against enemies who want to try and sabotage it with their assassin or sabotage heroes. But especially when you first deploy it, its big bonus is that action point bonus. So not much else to do this turn. Just going to click the end turn button. Don't want to start spending resources yet. Just keep going with the flow. So, start moving eyes and ears. Explore those. Those only take 2 movement to go through. They're just difficult terrain, not very difficult terrain like the mountains are. I'm exploring these first because more often than not, if there's going to be something interesting to find, it's going to be in terrain something like this. It'll be in a mountain, it'll be in the hills or something like that. And if I can find a nice independent facility right near my base, it just makes my starting location that much stronger. So for the rest of this turn, I can't draw any more cards. My next objective is it'll be waiting a couple more turns, but I want to get this industrial complex out, because that'll start getting me the energy and the materials built up that much quicker. The other thing I'm hoping to get sooner rather than later is a hero. Because right now, my Imperial Fortress, down here you see it says RC, Resource Collection, 1 human, 1 material, 1 tech, 1 energy. But you'll see here my Abandoned Base tile has 2 humans, 2 material, 1 energy, and 1 tech. Which means that there's 1 unit of humans and 1 unit of material that's not being collected right now. And I'm not collecting anything from either the destroyed factories or the shantytowns either. To start collecting those, you need to actually build a resource collector on them. A recruitment post for humans, energy farm for energy, a tech team for technology, that sort of stuff. But only heroes or engineer units can build those, and I don't have any engineer units in this deck, so I gotta rely on the heroes. Any hero will do. It can be a scientist or a spy or a general, it doesn't matter who. But as long as they're heroes, so not much else this turn. I can't draw any more cards because my hand's at its maximum size, so I'll just end the turn. Go first. Oh, see, here's one of those special things that I was hoping to maybe find. So, your army has discovered an abandoned military depot. You may choose to de-stealth to claim it, remain and observe it, or continue on your way. Now, I'm just going to observe for just a second here. Because when you find the abandoned military depots, you usually find weapons. And you can attach them to a unit, but you can't do that unless you can fit it in your hand. And as you can see right now, my hand is full. So I'm going to observe just temporarily and then drop a unit of infantry in and then claim this. There, see? So I found flamers. They will attach to another unit. They give it +2 attack, also the ability of shock attack, which will automatically commit any unit that gets hit by it. And you can attach them to infantry, robots, mutants, power battle armor, and xenogites. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to pop it in my hand. There it is there. And because I had to take them out of stealth, I'm just going to put them back into stealth. And I don't want to use this on the... Actually, no, I will give it to the infantry. It's not the most useful weapon, but because they have the extra attachments, adding it onto them does beef them up a bit, and also frees up a spot in my hand so I can draw another card. Oh, and I got Sigmund Gordon, which is wonderful, because not only is he a hero, but he's also a scout hero. And you can see his abilities here. He increases the strength of the observation checks made by his army by 1 die. So he doesn't have the recon ability on his own, But what he'll do is he'll increase the recon ability of any unit he's with. So if I were to attach him to these Rangers, they would become Strength 7, which makes it a lot easier for them to detect hidden units. Now he also has, I keep wanting to move the mouse up to highlight stuff, but he can also go into stealth, which is useful, and he is a bounty hunter, so if I'm hunting enemy heroes, it's easier for him to catch them. Other than that, he's definitely not a frontline leader. He only has 2 wounds, so most of the general type heroes have 3. He's got a command rate of 4, so he can only command 4 other units. Most of the generals, again, can command 8. Fate of 4, and Fate is a special thing that heroes have that allow them to make rerolls. So if you roll a die and it comes up as a failure, the Fate will let you re-roll that and hopefully succeed. And then movement of 4, so I can attach him to my Rangers and have them still run around really fast and not worry about getting slowed down by having a hero attached. And a resistance of 1, which again is just for the occasional biological attack that would cause problems for poor Sigmund. So with that, I'm going to end my turn again. Quick second. And now because I want Sigmund to wait around here for at least a turn or 2 to get the recruiting post and the materials team built, I'm going to continue to have eyes and ears just move around kind of on their own. Oh, hello. I just found an enemy unit. Okay, so we have the Stalkers. Well, the Stalkers is just the unit name, but they have a unit of Ravengers. And Ravengers are a scout unit for the mutants. You can see they're mutants riding dinosaurs with binoculars. And they're fairly tough. They can't go into stealth. But if you look at their abilities, attack of 5, defense of 4, 5 hit points, and compare those to my Imperial Rangers, where we have an attack of 4, a defense of 4, and 6 hit points, they're about on par with those guys. So I'm kind of reassessing. I'm thinking that the mutants might actually be more up in this direction, directly to my north, and this whole half of the map is just sort of uninhabited. But that's a question for next turn. I need to debate whether or not I actually want to fight those guys or not. Glad I threw that infantry into here, because at least then they can put up a fight. Because these guys have commander as well, which means they can operate out of supply and kind of wherever they want without having to worry about the out of supply penalties. So let's end this turn. Okay, we're going first. You know what? I think I might actually put a cut in here. I'm at about just over almost 25 minutes here. So I'm going to put a cut in and see you guys after the jump.